Hello everyone, how you doing? So, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the other worlds and a good deal about spirits and intangibility and things like that. So a little bit weird, but stick with me, okay? So, as I talked to you about in the previous video, magic, there are spiritual beings and there are other worlds. Not necessarily just heaven and hell, but different dimensions, each filled with their own inhabitants. Um, yeah, there we go. So these other worlds are really numerous and really difficult to explain. There is scientific research into this, like there are other worlds in which you've made other decisions, or there are worlds in which you may not even exist, but that's not the kind of worlds I'm talking about. I'm talking about innate different dimensions. Places where like places with different like laws of physics. Like we're talking some really interesting stuff here. Um, Now the thing that connects all of them, aside from the creator, is that magic, and that magic really does exist everywhere. But so these other worlds are all filled with, or at least usually they're filled with spirits. So most common one that everybody knows about, just about, is heaven and hell. So heaven, and this is of course an umbrella term because so there's heaven, which is innately good, filled with angels and the souls of the righteous dead. And there's hell, or Sheol, or the netherworld, or whatever you want to call it, which is filled with demons and the unrighteous dead. Um, Again, it's really not a good description, but it gets you there. So these other worlds, they're all connected. In the computer metaphor that I've used numerous times before, the spirits are the things that happen behind the scenes, um, and the worlds are kind of like, they're actually kind of like that, you know? There's a bunch of different stages and a bunch of different audiences, and there's always a backstage, and the backstage is the same for all these worlds. There's ways to get to every single place. There are portals or doorways or wormholes, whatever you want to call them, and there are these places where two dimensions touch. And so a lot of times people think of these different dimensions as like different planets almost, like they're all separated, and that's true. They're also all connected, but the really best way to think about them is like taking a bunch of stacks of paper and sticking them all on top of one another, and then if you could, crumpling them all into one little tiny space. um, they're a lot more connected than you think, and um, they all really serve a purpose. So there are spiritual beings in all of them. There are spiritual beings here, there are spiritual beings in heaven and hell, to everywhere. Um, and they all serve their purposes where they are needed. To us, this is important because as human beings, we will die someday. And what does that mean as far as dimensions go? Well, to start off first, there are spiritual beings of death. They're not necessarily creepy, they're here to separate our bits and pieces. So, like in ancient times, this was Anubis, um, taking apart our soul and our spiritual body and everything else and putting them where they need to go. Um, they don't always do this, and they don't always do this well, which is why a lot of people have issues with it. If you're a particularly strong person, you can evade the spirit that's trying to do this. The most famous one is Azrael. There are others. There's plenty. They all do things that they're supposed to do. So when we die, if we're going where we're supposed to be going, our soul is transported to another location. Whether that be heaven, hell, whatever. I can't say for you or for me or for anyone else. Um, our physical body no longer has a purpose, usually, so it withers. It's still charged with a lot of spiritual power depending on the person, but that's not important. Um, So we go to this other dimension, we spend time there, things happen. That's not really important, but the thing is that you will inevitably go to another dimension, most likely, as a human. So that's cool. You get to go to another dimension after you die. Be creepy if you went there before you died, wouldn't it? So another interesting thing about that is that spirits and our souls exist backstage. We do not exist, like, our bodies exist on stage, but we exist backstage. And that's kind of how we get around. If you are innately connected to this world and this stage, you will stay in this world and this stage. um, but if you step outside of that, and if you're not so connected to this world, when you die, you are backstage, you're capable of going to all the other stages, all the other worlds. And this is what we refer to as intangibility. So when you're intangible, or when anything is intangible, because all spirits are intangible by nature, it simply means that you are not capable of being affected by the stage innately. You can, spirits, human souls, they're all capable of developing an energy body out of their spirit, which can interact with the stage, but it's not the same thing as having a physical body. Like, you can cut a physical body and it will bleed. You can't really cut an energetic body. And this is how spirits interact with our world. They will take on an energetic form, although technically they're not really energy, they're existing backstage anyway. Um, it's kind of like when you poke your finger into like a pool or like into water. If you were like a fish swimming around, you'd see like there's this thing sticking in the water. What is it? But you would never see everything else that it's attached to, kind of. All right. So that's sort of what intangibility means and what it means to be not physical. You are backstage from that point on. Um, some people believe in reincarnation, which I'm not saying that's not valid. It totally could be true. In which case, you just go right back on stage eventually. Um, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. So that's, if you ever hear me talking about backstage or front stage ever again, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Um, the most important thing, though, is that beings that we are, or at least that our bodies and our consciousnesses are on the stage, that's where the action has to take place. Backstage, it's all wires, it's all, it's the stuff that does matter, but it's not what the audience wants to see. So yeah, alright. Hope you guys liked that video. Rate, comment, subscribe, ask me any questions you want. Alright, and yeah, happy hunting.